So the Rockets decided to fire Daryl Morey. Actually, no, I read that wrong. Daryl Morey steps down as GM of the Houston Rockets. The first thing that comes to mind is this the end of radical small ball? I mean, around the league, damn near every team plays some facet of small ball, whether it be a small ball 4, a stretch 4, like a traditional small forward playing power forward, or like a non-traditional center who's like 6'9", aka Bam Adebayo. Like, we see some form of small ball in damn near every team in the NBA, but the Rockets notably took it to a whole nother level. And the question is that going to be the end of that for the Rockets in the present, and will we ever really see that in the future? With the firing, or with Daryl Morey stepping down, this could have been foreseen by basically anybody in the basketball world. It was evident that Daryl Morey was just as tied to D'Antoni as D'Antoni was as tied to Daryl Morey. So if one went, so did the other. You weren't going to have one but not the other, based off of how much Daryl Morey built the entire roster around D'Antoni's system, or whatever D'Antoni wanted. If D'Antoni wanted James Harden to run point guard, Daryl Morey decided to either trade or not bring back Jeremy Lin and make James Harden the primary ball handler to set everybody up, or choose to score for himself. If Mike D'Antoni really wanted to commit heavily to threes and up-tempo basketball like he had in Phoenix, Daryl Morey surrounded Harden with as many shooters as he could find. Ryan Anderson, Eric Gordon, remember that free agency, 5 years ago? And if Mike D'Antoni wanted to not have a center at all on the floor the entire 48 minutes of a game, Daryl Morey decides to trade basically a top third starting center in the NBA in Clint Capella, and doesn't get a center at all in return. So yeah, it was evident that if one went, so did the other. Can we say that small ball failed? I mean, we only got to see a half of a season of it. I mean, not even a half, because it got shortened due to the hiatus. So we got to see 20 games of radical small ball and 2 rounds of it in the playoffs. So I mean, I guess we can say it failed because they're basically giving up on it. But I mean, this is kind of pointless saying that. What if the Rockets had an off season of D'Antoni and Morey and more experience of it and practicing around it and trying to fine tune it so that it was more successful next season? Could it have been successful in them finally getting over the hump and getting to an NBA championship? We'll never know. But I mean, take into account that they really tried to embrace this radical small ball halfway into an NBA season and didn't really have time to prepare for it. So can we say it failed? Some people will say it failed because it didn't get them a championship. Some will say there wasn't enough time to tell. I mean, I guess now we can look back at Daryl Morey's time in Houston. Believe it or not, he was the GM of the Houston Rockets for 13 years. He was the GM since 2007, since the 2007-2008 season. And that's incredibly rare. If you look around the NBA, there's so many teams that are in constant limbo in terms of trying to find a general manager or president of basketball operations that can just stay there for at least a decade, at least 5 years, before they're either fired or decide to step down before they're fired. So it's incredibly rare for a GM like Daryl Morey to stay for more than a decade. And he was able to stay because he was incredibly successful as the GM. If you just measure regular season success, the Houston Rockets held the second highest regular season record, or the second best regular season record over the past 13 years, which consists of Daryl Morey's tenure as GM. The Rockets had the longest active consecutive playoff streak, 8 seasons. And I mean, I guess you can say, oh yeah, that's all just regular season success, but it's success nonetheless. They just couldn't get over the hump in terms of getting to an NBA championship. That can be attributed to untimely injuries in the playoffs, the biggest shooting choke job in the NBA history, where they went 0 of 27 from 3 in a game 7, and them just having to run into the Warriors damn near every postseason. We can also look back at Daryl Morey's time as being gutsy. He was able to pull off many blockbuster trades, getting James Harden for quite a bargain. I mean, you're getting a future MVP for Kevin Martin and a couple of future first-round picks. He was able to get Chris Paul in a sign and trade, basically trading away Patrick Beverley, Lou Williams, and Montrezl Harrell. That almost got them to the NBA Finals. And he was able to trade for Russell Westbrook. I mean, Daryl Morey's basically traded for 3 Hall of Famers in the span of 13 years, which is pretty impressive. And he also made 77 trades since May 2007, the second most in his 13-year span. I mean, there is such a thing as trading for the sake of trading, but I mean, you look around the NBA, there's so many GMs and presidents of basketball operations that just stand pat and don't really make moves, and they're kind of scared to make a move in the fear of that move kind of jeopardizing their career or jeopardizing their job. We can say that Daryl Morey really wasn't afraid to make a trade if he thought it would benefit the team. And we can also say that his time was revolutionary. I mean, the amount of threes shot in the past 5 years, that can be attributed to the Warriors winning championships based off of the Splash Brothers, but it can also be attributed to Daryl Morey taking it to another level, and in doing so, getting his team to Western Conference Finals over and over again. Daryl Morey and the Houston Rockets were a part of the three-ball movement. Daryl Morey and the Rockets were kind of the leaders in terms of embracing analytics, especially in the face of NBA old heads that appear on television every day. Small ball fours, he was kind of at the forefront of that. And of course, he was at the forefront of running no center at all. So I guess we can look back at Daryl Morey's time in Houston and we can view it as very beneficial for the Houston Rockets franchise and for the NBA as a whole. So what does him stepping down from the GM position mean for the future of this team? I mean, I guess there's multiple directions that this franchise can go in. Do they embrace a rebuild fully and trade everyone, trade all of their most valuable assets, James Harden, Russell Westbrook, Robert Covington, Eric Gordon? Do they do that? They could go down the route of really scapegoating Russell Westbrook and only moving him and try to get maybe 2 starting caliber players for him, or just getting salary cap relief. I mean, it's kind of hard to do that when your roster was literally built for Russell Westbrook, so you don't have a center clogging the paint. But I mean, I had some sample trades that kind of revolved around trading Westbrook in another video before this one. I mean, another option could be them trying to retool the roster and not trading all of their assets, not trading their star players, retooling the roster around James Harden and Russell Westbrook. You kind of have to do that because the entire roster was really built around James Harden and Russell Westbrook isolations with no off-ball movement. Can you really retool the offense around them to gravitate away from just one player dominating the ball for 24 seconds of the clock with no off-ball movement? It's going to be hard for them to do that really because they don't really have draft assets that can be traded because they traded 3 picks? 3 of their future picks for Russell Westbrook. So we'll see what the new GM decides to do. And speaking of the new GM, it's Rafael Stone. In a report from Adrian Woj, he said that the Rockets are planning to promote Executive Vice President of Basketball Operations Rafael Stone to General Manager. So I'm not going to cap and act like I know what he's going to do or how much of the Rockets' success he has been responsible for. But, I mean, he was under Daryl Morey for, I don't know how long he's been there, but he was the former vice president. So he was under Daryl Morey. So will he be just as analytically driven? Will he commit to a heavy threes personnel? I don't know. I'm not going to act like I do know. But what I do know is that the Rockets are still without a head coach. And that's going to be just as important for them as promoting their VP to GM. If we look at the head coaching carousel, Kenny Atkinson's still out there. I think Dave Yeager's not out there anymore. He took an assistant coaching job. Ty Lue was off the board, but there was a report that Jeff Van Gundy recently interviewed for the position. He interviewed with ownership. He was a prominent coach in the 90s of the New York Knicks, and then in the 2000s with the Houston Rockets. He coached that T-Mac and Yao team in the 2000s. He commentates hella NBA games, like current day NBA games, so he has to be in tune with the times, but will he coach like that though? Will he coach similar to how he coached in the 90s and 2000s, or will he try and adjust with the times? In the report, there were 2 other candidates that were kind of like in the top 3 with Jeff Van Gundy. Steven Silas, a Dallas assistant, and John Lucas, who was a recent Houston Rockets assistant. I don't really know their track record, so I'm not going to act like I do. But I mean, it's going to be interesting to see who they do hire and if the incoming coach will want to kind of revamp what the Houston Rockets have been about for the past 5 years, or try to make them a more traditional team with an actual center, or trying to get the new GM to give them an actual center, implementing more off-ball movement, James Harden actually playing like a shooting guard, Russell Westbrook trying to cut off ball instead of just standing in the corner doing nothing. To close, the state of Houston Rockets is really weird. I mean, if you look at their roster, it's in the state of being a perennial second round or Western Conference Finals exit. And does the new GM really think that a coaching change is going to put them over the hump and get them to an NBA championship? Honestly, personally, I don't think so. I don't really think there's a coach that can really, if you say, oh, we signed this coach, it's going to get us to an NBA championship. I don't think there's a coach out there that can do that for them. And based off of that, I think it's fair to say that the new GM, Rafael Stone, he can take this roster in two different directions. For one, he can accept that this roster can't get over the hump and he can embrace the rebuild, trade Russell Westbrook for as many assets you can get, hopefully trade James Harden for an ascending young star. I've seen James Harden traded for Ben Simmons in a lot of NBA online hypothetical trades. I mean, if you're going to embrace a rebuild, Ben Simmons is not a bad player to get, especially if you can build a roster around them. So yeah, you can go down the route of trading everybody and trying to embrace a rebuild, or you can go down the route of believing in what your predecessor, in terms of Rafael Stone, believing what his predecessor, Daryl Morey, built. Believing in that, being confident in a coach being able to put the team over the hump, and still gunning for that title appearance. And in my honest opinion, I think based off of the coaches that have been interviewed, you're interviewing, I don't know how old Jeff Van Gundy is. I think he's in his 50s or 60s. You're interviewing him. I think you're interviewing him to try and win now, and compared to I don't think you're hiring Jeff Van Gundy to be a part of a rebuild. So I think Stone will choose the latter over the former. Also, just a bit of a disclaimer, there's going to be a lot more videos like this of me just talking, not much editing going on, because we're in the NBA off season and there's not many video ideas that I can really think about. So yeah, whenever like a news headline like this comes out, I'll probably just do an A Funky Diabetic type of video like this, so expect more to come.